Yep, so we're in the natural category. All of our ingredients adhere to like the highest standards, and we keep everything very clean, very few ingredients as well. So that creates a better cost structure for us, all of those things. And so with that, that kind of helped us, figure out we want to be in this natural category and therefore the natural, stores. I really want to make sure that we do sell through and our velocities are good and we're getting a community built around this new product because you can get discontinued very quickly, and it's so new that we have to make sure that people do understand what it is and drive trial, of course, and then drive reorders and people, just loving this and buying it more often.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Startup CPG podcast. This is Grace, and today I'm talking to Stephanie Berwick, the founder of Pastazerts. Pastazerts is a dessert pasta company and the creator of the world's first chocolate ravioli, combining the artistry of traditional pasta with the indulgence of chocolate to create an entirely new dessert category. Stephanie and I chat all about the challenges of frozen, how a crowdfunding round set them up to scale, and how she sees Pastazerts making a name for itself in the dessert category. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, let me know what you think. Hello, everyone. This is Grace, and I'm here today with Stephanie Berwick, the founder of Pastazerts. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Grace. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to learn more about Pastazerts, this truly first of its kind, I think, at least. I've never heard of this before. Chocolate ravioli brand. Could you introduce what is Pastazerts to our listeners?
Absolutely. So Pastazerts is a chocolate ravioli company. And, we basically make this innovative dessert that people are loving. So it's a lot of fun. I have a great story behind it and how I kind of came up with the idea. But chocolate ravioli is essentially fusing cocoa powder into pasta dough and creating what I call a vessel for sweet, creamy fillings. And right now we have a peanut butter and jelly, and we have a strawberry cheesecake, and we have some new flavors coming out soon.
Oh my God, so fun. Yes, it's such a fun idea that I can imagine so many both kids and adults loving. But speaking of how you came up with this idea, how did you come up with this idea? Because like I said, I've never heard of anything like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is the world's first chocolate ravioli, I like to say. So I came up with the idea through amateur cooking competitions way back about 12 years ago. I was dabbling and, just having fun with them. I actually won $15,000 on a quesadilla recipe. and and it was, phenomenal and a great experience. And I was working in technology, 20-year career in Fintech. So this was really just, kind of on the side, spending some time in the kitchen led me to a little bit of amateur cooking and amateur competitions. Winning that first competition was, kind of, oh, I should do this more often. And so that led to winning my way into the World Food Championships. And at the time, it was in Las Vegas. So my husband and I, who he is a chef, a real chef, and we went out to Vegas 2 years in a row, 2013 and 2014. The format is a theme. The first year was pasta, the second year was dessert. So you had to do multiple dishes, and one of the dishes the first year I took was the chocolate ravioli, and it was a variation on a peppermint flavor filling. And, we did like a strawberry compote as a sauce, whipped cream, and kind of served it nicely plated. And then I just took it again for the dessert theme. So it was a lot of fun. And that, kind of led me to 10 years later or so, just feeling a little complacent in tech and maybe thinking about a career change, and thought maybe we could do something with this chocolate ravioli. Let's make it a thing.
I love it. That's so fun. And I didn't even know that I know about the Great British Baking Show, but other than that, I don't think I really knew about a lot of these amateur cooking competitions, but sounds like a really great opportunity and also a great way to come up with new ideas such as this one. I'm curious when you 10 years later, were kind of like, "Okay, maybe I should make this a thing." What were some of your first steps? Because it doesn't sound like you're coming from a CPG background, and so how did you sort of begin the process of turning this into a packaged good?
Yes, that's a great question. It's a journey, I'm sure, as you know, and most founders go through the same kind of process. And, I was still working and, full time in the tech career. And I just felt, let's start somewhere, and I was reading a book, and that's kind of the theme of that book. And it was, okay, what can I do to just get off the ground? What's like the first step? And so I just got the tax ID number, I got the business incorporated, right? Just the basic legal pieces to start something. And then, just testing in the kitchen, my home kitchen, what kind of recipe can we do? And what kind of fillings should we start with? Things along those lines. And, that kind of led to what are the sales channels we want to go into? Is this going to be frozen or, what are the logistical pieces around it? And then pop-up markets, right? That's kind of the best way to get customer feedback. And, this is a new product. Are people even going to like it? Is it going to be a viable thing? So, those were kind of the first rounds of testing, if you will, and market research. And I'm in Rockaway Beach in New York City. And so we did a lot of pop ups here in our local community. And honestly, some of the customer feedback, it was all great, but we actually changed the recipe slightly. We were not baking them or cooking them in the production process, and people were telling us, "We really wanna just, like, grab this and bring it to a dinner party and not have to do anything with it," you know? So, you can warm it up, but you can also eat it cold, and so we changed kind of that process immediately, so now it's, something that you don't have to actually warm up if you don't want to. So that was really great feedback. And then that led to a commercial kitchen, and, my husband and I were self-producing for about a year, and, that was a lot. It was, hard work, but I felt like it was the right thing to do before jumping into, a contract manufacturer or something like that, and, still proving out, are the stores gonna take this in and, what our sales channels are really gonna be, and then, of course, that led to more of a commercialization from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I hear that from so many founders that they start with self-manufacturing and starting at, like, small pop-ups and getting that customer feedback to hone in on exactly what you're talking about is like, "Oh, people wanna be able to just grab this and eat it immediately. They don't wanna have to cook it," and that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, during that time, were you also trying out different flavors, and is that sort of how you came up to focus in on these 2 for the beginning?
Yes and no. I'm gonna say there were 4 flavors when we first started out. Actually, there were 5. We had a pina colada filling, and, we kinda discontinued that one, but maybe it'll make a comeback. And then we had our original, I call it the OG, the peppermint flavor that I had in the World Food Championships. The majority of our flavors, our fillings are cream cheese based, so then it was just like a variation of what extracts or, strawberry compotes can we add in? And then we have our peanut butter and jelly, which is obviously non-dairy, and a little different, than everything else. So we were really starting out with peppermint. We had a fig and cream, and then strawberry cheesecake and peanut butter and jelly. That pina colada kind of was out there in the beginning, and then we saw some of the data from last year, right? The sales data and what's really resonating with customers. And it was very clear the strawberry cheesecake and peanut butter and jelly were kind of the clear winners. And maybe the other two were more seasonal. So we basically went into retail with those two flavors, PBJ and strawberry cheesecake. And from here, we're going to probably push into a little bit more Italian branded. So Italian flavors. I don't want to say yet because we're going to announce those soon. But we're getting some feedback on the food service side from like Italian restaurants and chefs that that's what they're looking for, a little bit more Italian branded since it is a ravioli.
That's awesome. I'm excited to hear what those flavors are. I won't take guesses because I don't wanna, put you in that put you into a corner. Um, but I'm curious, you were saying you started getting that data, and when did you decide you needed to move into a co-man to become a little bit more commercialized? Like, how did you know I hear that question a lot, like, how do you know you're ready to work with a co-man, and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, for us, it was pretty clear because we're a frozen item. In the commercial kitchen, we had, sort of a cage right in the freezer where we would store our inventory. And it became very clear when I can't fit a pallet at all into that cage. So, we had, it was a good stepping stone for us when we're doing kind of the smaller, direct to distribution, direct to retailer, fair sales, things like that, drop ship. And we had, really good kind of first chain store around New York that took us in last year. And it was difficult even, to store that amount that they had ordered. So we actually broke up the order into two separate deliveries. And that was kind of the aha moment of, well, if a distributor onboards us and orders a pallet, there's no way we could fit that into our commercial kitchen. So that was kind of the clarifying moment for us. And it took a long time to actually find the contract manufacturer. So we were still, self-producing for quite some time, even after we knew that we had to, scale up and move, production elsewhere.
Yeah. How did you find a co-man? Because again, it's a brand new product, a brand, I've also heard that a lot. People who are creating brand new things, it can add an extra challenge in finding a co-man who's willing to create the product in the way you want. And so how did you go about finding someone to actually make Pastazerts?
It's a great question. And for us, it was a long journey and very questionable in the beginning. I didn't know if we needed a pasta manufacturer or we needed a bakery, like a commercial bakery, because it's, the product is adjacent to a pastry, but it is pasta, right? We're basically adding cocoa powder to pasta dough. So we weren't sure in the beginning. And I was calling pasta manufacturers, big and small and everywhere in between. Wasn't getting great results from that expedition. And then I reached out to a consultant that actually does, co-man searches and co-packer searches. And he found one very quickly, and that's actually who we ended up going with. But it did take, 6 months from the introductory call to the first production run, and a lot of testing and figuring things out in between that. So it was an interesting conversation when, if you think of a regular ravioli producer, they have this big machinery and they are usually putting through ricotta into their lines, right? Things along those lines. And when I say I want peanut butter put through your lines, that reaction was interesting. Yeah. So we figured it out.
And so is the co-man a, like, more dessert-focused co-man, or did you end up finding someone that was a pasta-focused?
He is a pasta producer, so it's a
Oh.
family-owned factory down in North Carolina who we're working with right now, and it is, really a pasta producer, and they started out very small back in the '80s, and now they have a 25,000 square foot facility, and they make multiple types of pasta. What we really were looking for is someone who makes ravioli because dried pasta is not necessarily, within the same wheelhouse of this filled type of pasta. So that's who we went with, and, they've been good to us so far. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you found someone, and it sounds like would you recommend to other founders, like, going the route of finding a consultant who can help you?
I think if you, just can't figure it out on your own, there's a certain point where I just felt no one's really either calling me back or saying that they can take me in. So what do? I know for a fact that I can't stay in this commercial kitchen for us to scale. So yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer at, one point to say I need help, right? And this consultant was amazing. He, had like a lower fee for emerging brands, and we didn't really know how long it would take, but he found someone so quickly that it just worked out.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's so important, I think, to know when you have to ask for help, when, like, you're just banging your head against the wall and there's nothing else you can do, and I think we can feel afraid of asking for help because we're like, "I should be able to do this," but at a certain point, you just gotta. So I'm curious now that you are in the co-man, what has been your approach to like working with retailers or trying to scale Pastazerts now that you have more capacity to do so?
Yeah, for us on the frozen side, again, it's kind of clear that we needed distribution. So that was the goal. And a lot of these pieces were all kind of the the balls in the air around the same time. So figuring out distribution, figuring out the contract manufacturer, and figuring out our retail and even food service sales, approach, our strategy all kind of culminated in, I would say, the last quarter of 2024. So this is all fairly new, honestly, right? We're only in April now, and it's been a few months since everything has kind of come online. So January is when we went into distribution. January is when we had our first production run, and January is really when we went into our first like retailers. A few retailers we had last year, but really kind of pushing in a little bit larger scale. So it's all very new and we're doing well, but it was a lot, in last quarter. That's for sure.
Totally. What did those conversations look like with buyers and distributors, given that, again, this is such a new product in the dessert category?
Yeah, it's tough because we don't really have, I guess, direct competition, right? And you can't say we don't have competition ever, but, when you're in the frozen section, you're thinking about dessert in a store. Are you looking at us and then maybe adding ice cream as a complementary item? So that's kind of how we're approaching things. We're not competing with ice cream. We're not really competing with like frozen pops. We're definitely a category creator, but at the end of the day, there's still choices, right? And so I think our competition is really like frozen cakes, maybe frozen cheesecakes, particularly, and, things along those lines, like even cream puffs, something that's not ice cream, essentially. So those conversations are a little hard, but I think most retailers do want innovation. And so they're willing to test this out, maybe on a smaller scale. If it's a larger chain and they have, say, 100 stores, they'll probably bring us into, 10, something like that. And then it's, supporting them obviously with demos and promos and all of kind of those, normal support systems that you put in place to sell off the shelf. And I think if talking to a retailer, that you have those pieces in place and, you kind of get that message across, then they're willing to take a chance on an innovative product. So far, so good.
We'll be right back.
Are you going to crush it on Amazon this year? It's such an important channel, but it's so hard to do alone, and most agencies are a total ripoff. We can't afford $5,000 a month and a commission on our sales. They just don't get it. That's why I love our partners at Daybreak. They are full service, meaning they do the creative work, the listings, the logistics, and of course, all the ads, all with the most reasonable retainer out there. I work with them personally. I'm so grateful we have such a good partner to recommend out to you, our community. They do evaluate your product first to see if it might be a fit. So if you want them to have a look, email them startupcpg@daybreak.agency and they'll do a free audit for you. Good luck, everyone.
What are you focused mostly on, like, the New York region right now, or what have been, like, your targets in the retail sector?
Yep. So we're in the natural category. All of our ingredients adhere to like the highest standards. And, we keep everything very clean, very few ingredients as well. So that creates a better cost structure for us, all of those things. And so with that, that kind of helped us, figure out we want to be in this natural category and therefore the natural, stores. And so I think in your backyard, right, is the best way to start where I can be visible. I can go visit stores, do the tours, do some demos myself, meet the teams in the stores as well. And so that's kind of our slow and controlled, approach to growth. So basically, the radius of New York City and along the East Coast is where we're pushing out to. And that is probably going to keep us for the next, several months, at least, probably for the next year, for the rest of this year. And then we'll consider maybe going, further out from that and going national next year. I really want to make sure that we do sell through and our velocities are good and we're getting a community built around this new product because, you can get discontinued very quickly. And it's so new that we have to make sure that people do understand what it is and drive trial, of course, and then drive reorders and people, just loving this and buying it more often.
Yeah. I'm curious, how are you making sure people understand what it is and building that community of Pastazerts lovers?
Yeah, a lot of social media, right? And getting, the announcements out there and just shouting it from the rooftop, showing a lot of plating and how to actually serve the ravioli so that people understand there's options. It's very versatile. You can eat it frozen, you can let it defrost a little bit, you could also warm it up. And so those three experiences just themselves are very different and how the texture is and how people actually consume them. So we try to do a lot of those like plating ideas, and here's a way to like consume it as a brownie sundae but replace the brownies, things like that through social media. I personally do obviously in-store demos, and we have some brand ambassadors that also kind of help out with that respect. And then, promos, right? Making sure that once we go into a new retailer, we're actually on sale immediately and advertised maybe in the retailer's flyer, right? Their weekly circular or something along those lines. So, kind of those three pieces between social media, in store demos, and promos seems to be working well. We're seeing very good velocities in larger chains.
That's awesome. I'm curious how those conversations go with retailers when you're like, "Hey, we're in store, we wanna do a promo immediately." How do those conversations go? Is there ever any pushback, or are they kinda like, "Great, sure." What does that look like?
I don't think we really get pushback. I mean, if we're on sale, I think the retailer's pretty happy because we're definitely driving some trial and, probably a little bit lower cost to them as well. So I think that's been pretty solid, as a strategy for us. And, that also creates kind of tags within the store. And think about frozen, right? There's always so many layers of complexity as a frozen brand. We're, just logistically behind a door that can frost up, right, as soon as you open it. So we have to stand out with packaging. And, if there's a sale tag on the product behind that door, that's even better, right? So it just drives, more trial. People will say, "Oh, what is that? Let me try it." And it's, kind of a low barrier to entry when it's a little bit lower cost for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And yeah, it makes sense that the retailer would be like, sure, we like people to try things and buy things. I was thinking about how you make sure like where pasta desserts goes in the frozen aisle. And I'm curious, like, are you ever coming to the store and noticing it's like by the, frozen raviolis that are savory or things like that? Is there ever any confusion about like where pasta desserts should go?
That's a great question, and yes, that has happened. I think, my distributor is amazing at that. They have a great sales and merchandising team, so, the message has definitely gotten across, from me and, my team to the particular distributor that we work with, and so most of the stores I walk into, they are merchandised correctly, from what I see, in my opinion, I suppose. And that to me is desserts, right? Frozen desserts. And I have walked into a couple of stores where they're sitting next to savory ravioli, right? And I don't think we don't have enough data yet, to say which is right, but my gut tells me it's got to be with the desserts because I'm thinking about it from a consumer perspective. If I'm going into that freezer section and saying I want dessert, then I'm probably gonna buy dessert, and if I'm going in there to say I want savory ravioli, I'm not thinking dessert, right? So, I think that's right, but the data will definitely tell us over time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you love working with your distributor because I often hear from frozen brands that is one of the biggest challenges is like finding a distributor and making sure everything stays frozen. But I'm curious how you have navigated some of the extra challenges that come with being a frozen brand.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think if I knew how challenging Frozen was, I may have rethought some things in the beginning, but I don't know. The shelf life is great, Frozen. It's a year shelf life, so that really helps us in many ways, especially starting out. But there's obviously added margin, added cost, to frozen. We have to store it frozen. So all of those pieces, I have an accounting finance background, so my spreadsheets are very well buttoned up. And, I just make sure all of those costs are embedded, right? And that we are, basically good on our margins. They're still thin, but, there's definitely profitability there. So that's just something that's always on my mind, and I'm always trying to make sure that our costs are reduced enough, but, we still have a quality product so that we can absorb some of those extra frozen pieces into the costing that we have. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've heard that so many times from people who have frozen brands. They're like, "If I knew how hard frozen would be, I might have done it differently." But you're in it now and, you'll make it work. Speak Oh,
Even
yeah.
sampling, sorry. Even sampling though, I mean, logistically, right? How do you carry around a frozen product? So I found a way. You always find a way, right? Get creative. I have a insulated backpack, right? And I just basically have like my samples in small cups that are lidded and ice packs in the backpack. And I just like trudge around everywhere with this insulated backpack on me to carry around samples.
I love it. Make it work, as they say. You really do. I'm thinking about some of those added costs though, and how you are managing to keep your margins, there and like sustainable. And I'm thinking about like just costs in general coming from your background. How did you approach like funding this CPG brand? Are you guys bootstrapping? What's been your approach?
Bootstrapping for sure. Coming out of a 20-year career, it was a little bit easier for me to start out with some, capital of my own. My husband and I, basically put in a bit of our own money, and that was early days. And that gets you only so far. And of course, especially layer on frozen, there are extra costs to that. Um, I would say, that brought us until probably the end of last year, and then I did a crowdfunding round that was actually a debt round. We could have gone equity, but I felt like getting my feet wet asking for money, it was a little bit easier for me at least to ask for money knowing that it would be repaid. And so that's the approach that I took, going to friends and family, former bosses, things like that, and, just your network. That was a really good experience. We were successful in that. It was a small raise. It definitely disappears like that, but it certainly got us through some, crucial times, right? When we were onboarding with that co-man, onboarding with distribution. And, there's a lot of like differential where I have to pay the co-man, but not getting paid yet by, my distributor. So kind of those cash flow pieces that are hard. And, that funding really helped us get through that crucial time.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Did you use like a crowdfunding platform?
I did. I went with Honeycomb Credit. And, like I said, they were really good to me. There were a couple of reasons. One was because I liked that they had the debt option versus the equity option. Number two was, and maybe I should have rethought this, but we weren't looking for too much. We basically wanted like 25,000. And some of the other platforms are great, certainly through the research, but they had a little bit higher minimum. So that was the reason that we chose Honeycomb essentially. And, they were really good to us. They had a platform where they have investors as well. So I call them strangers, right? Where as soon as I raised, I think it was 10% of the original goal, they opened up the offering to their investors as well. So we had, just new folks, right, that I didn't know at all come in and, put a little money in as well. And that was lovely. So I sent them all samples and got them, on board of the chocolate ravioli train.
I love that. How did you have to it sounds like you did a lot of personal outreach, but did you do any, like, external advertising?
We did a little bit of social media advertising, put a few dollars into some meta ads, I think a little bit on TikTok, but not too much. It was really, pick up the phone, send emails, a lot of LinkedIn outreach as well. And I mean, it's helpful when you come off a 20-year career in a whole different industry, especially technology, where there's some deep pockets, we'll say. Uh, and it was just amazing to see former colleagues, like I said, some former bosses, even some people that worked for me as, I was managing them contributing. So it was just so great to see the support from kind of this, other industry that I just left. And it was just amazing. It was a fantastic opportunity to kind of re-engage with all these people and show them, something that I'm building.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Speaking of building, now that you are, in this stage of growth, what do you hope to see for kind of the second half of 2025? What are your priorities for Pastazerts this year?
Yes. Yeah, priorities. And I do think like that, right? And I kind of bucket, these four or so priorities that I have right now. And as a solopreneur, my husband is part owner, but he works full time. So most of it's on me, let's be honest, right? And I have a really good team around me in terms of some, sort of freelancers that I've built, but everything really still does, fall on my shoulders. So my buckets, my priorities are one, sales, pretty easy, right? But that breaks down to making sure that the stores that we are in on the East Coast that I mentioned, from our strategy this year are performing, right? And so that's where that piece comes in of supporting, velocities with the demos and the promos, et cetera. So not going too fast, right? Not opening too many doors, but making sure that the stores that we are in, we are selling, right? And we're building that community. And then 2 is going to be operational efficiency. So getting, the cost of goods sold down a little bit from the supply chain. So ensuring that my suppliers are the best price, the best quality of all the ingredients. And then from there, it's fundraising. So it was great to do a small round last year, but now I think we need to kind of put on our big girl pants and actually do a VC round or a seed round with some angel investors. And that's going to be kind of the big initiative coming into the second quarter. So planting those seeds and then I think the fourth piece is, food service for us. We do love our CPG world. We do love the retailers and it's so cool to see your product on the shelf. It really is. What's even really more cool is actually going into the store and watching someone purchase it without any prompt, no demo, just like organically walking the aisle and someone opening that door and taking it off the shelf. I've seen that happen a few times. So that's great. And we love retail, but I think our product is really ripe for food service as well. So that's going to be another priority for me.
So exciting. Yeah, I can definitely see that working out in some restaurants. And it sounds like, your husband is in that field as well. So seems like perfect synergy. Um, a question I also always love to ask that's a little bit bigger is thinking about a piece of advice you wish you'd known when you started out. Now that you're, you know, a few years in, I think, maybe like 2 years. Yeah. What's a piece of advice you've now learned that you wish you'd known on day one?
Yeah, there's a few. Certainly. For me, one is maybe rethink Frozen. I don't know. I mean, there is a path to profitability in Frozen. I think it's fine. It's just, harder, right? And you have to really watch every dime that you spend, especially with the thinner margins in Frozen. So I think that would be a lesson for myself, my younger self a year and a half ago or so when I really went full time on this and don't spend too much too early. You really don't need to like over purchase things like packaging and, even insulated cases, things like that to help logistics. Packaging, particularly, I do a just in time order every time we do a production run now because there's always tweaks still in these early days that I want to make on the packaging itself, right? So, that's another one. Don't over purchase, right? I know that your cost of goods sold is very important, and every cent, right, matters. But if you purchase too much, then you're going to be sitting on something that you're not going to use, so it doesn't work out anyway. And I would just say make sure that you know your unit economics, right? And even if they're not perfect day one, which they won't be, make sure that there is kind of a line of sight to where you are profitable on those unit economics. And if retail doesn't make sense right away, right, figure out another sales channel. Maybe it's direct to consumer, maybe it's food service, right? Whatever that looks like for you and your own brand and your own product.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great advice. Well, my last question is just how can our Startup CPG listeners support Pastazerts and follow along on the journey?
Oh, thank you for that. Obviously, we love the support. It's such a fun product, right? So just try it. Go out and buy some. We have a store locator on our website, pastazerts.com. We have a store locator also on our social media. Everything is at Pastazerts. Just come support us at trade shows, right? To come try it. If we're sampling in store, come try it and follow us on social media as well.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Stephanie. It was a pleasure to learn more about Pastazerts and can't wait to see where you guys go next.
And thank you, Grace. It was a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would help us out so much if you left a 5-star review on ratethispodcast.com/startupcpg. I am Grace Kennedy, the host of the Founder Feature Series, so feel free to add me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on Slack. I'm always on the hunt for new and exciting brands to feature. And if you're a potential sponsor who would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And finally, as a reminder for anyone listening, if you haven't already, we would love for you to join our community on Slack. You can sign up via our website, startupcpg.com.